So, I began, trying to sound casual. I'm working on a custom UAV project, heavy lift, needs to carry a specific payload with stability. I slid the spec sheet for a mid-range cordless hedge trimmer across the counter, next to a pile of tiny propellers. Zero Cool picked it up. His eyes widened behind the glasses. He looked at the sheet, then at me, then back at the sheet. He let out a low whistle. Whoa, payload equals hedge trimmer, bruh. He actually said, bruh. That's like maximum entropy, dude. The vibration? Gonna shake the flight controller into next Tuesday. The weight? Gonna need insane thrust. FAA gonna be all up in your airspace like... He paused, tapping the spec sheet. But the challenge? Custom octoframe, maybe coaxial rotors, high discharge lipos in parallel, custom firmware tune, meh? Hella challenging. A slow grin spread across his face. Okay, YOLO, I'm in. But this ain't gonna be cheap. Need serious cashola like Boku bucks. He made a rubbing fingers together gesture. Deal? My name is Alex. I live in Serenity Acres. A name so dripping with irony it should probably be printed on a warning label. It's your standard issue American suburbia. Identical houses painted in shades ranging from agreeable almond to passive putty. Lawns manicured with terrifying precision, and an HOA that communicates primarily through passive-aggressive newsletters about recycling bin etiquette. I work in software development, which means I spend my days wrangling code and my evenings trying to forget about wrangling code, usually by wrangling weeds or wrestling with a stubborn Wi-Fi router. Generally, I aim for a quiet life. Keep my lawn reasonably tidy, pay my taxes, avoid direct eye contact with Carol from accounting. The usual. My main tool in the battle against suburban entropy is Old Bessie. She's a gas-powered lawnmower, probably old enough to vote, built like a Cold War-era tank, and painted a faded but defiant shade of red. She's loud. She vibrates enough to potentially register on the Richter scale, and she occasionally belches a puff of blue smoke. But damn it, she cuts grass. Deep down, I love that old machine. The roar of her engine on a Saturday morning isn't noise. It's the sound of domestic responsibility being met head-on. It's the suburban equivalent of a Viking battle cry. I'd even given her a tune-up last month. New plug, fresh oil, sharpened the blade myself. Bessie was running sweet. Too sweet, apparently, for Karen. Karen lives diagonally across the street. Her house is immaculate. Her lawn looks like green velvet, possibly imported from a Swiss mountainside. Her hedges are sculpted into geometric shapes that defy both nature and good taste. Karen is the self-appointed guardian of Serenity Acres' fragile, serenity. Last Christmas, she left me a note complaining that my festive inflatable snowman was excessively jovial and distracted from the solemnity of the season. Solemnity of an inflatable snowman. That's Karen. It was 10:30 a.m., a perfect Saturday. Sun shining, birds chirping, the satisfying roar of Old Bessie reducing my unruly fescue to neat, pleasing stripes. I had my earbuds in, blasting some classic rock, lost in the zone. Then, a disturbance in the force. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. I glanced over. There she was, standing at the precise point where my lawn met the sidewalk, arms crossed, face pinched like she'd just sucked on a particularly sour lemon. I sighed, cut the engine, and pulled out an earbud. The sudden silence felt accusatory. "Alex!" Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Must you make that infernal racket? It's absolutely shattering the peace." I looked at Bessie, who sat there idling with a gentle put-put-put. I looked up and down the street, where at least 3 other gasoline-powered beasts were similarly engaged in their weekly follicular duties. "Infernal racket? It's a lawnmower, Karen. It's 10:30 on a Saturday morning. This is literally what Saturdays sound like in the suburbs. Your mower, she insisted, gesturing at Bessie like she was a rabid dog, is unusually disruptive. It resonates at a frequency that I find deeply disturbing to my inner calm. I swear, she actually said, inner calm. There are bylaws, you know, noise ordinances. It's 10:30 a.m., I repeated slowly, trying to keep the sarcasm from dripping too heavily. Noise ordinances usually kick in much earlier or later than this, and Bessie's probably quieter than Mr. Henderson's leaf blower was last week. That's entirely different, she sniffed. Leaves are a natural occurrence. Your engine noise is an assault. Have you considered investing in a silent electric model? Or perhaps hiring Chad's eco-goats? They're carbon neutral and surprisingly thorough, though their droppings can be an issue. Goats. She wanted me to replace my mower with goats. Karen, I'm almost done. 20 minutes tops. 20 minutes too long, she declared. Some of us are trying to enjoy our patios in tranquility. I will be filing a formal complaint with the HOA and the city. She spun on her heel, her sensible walking shoes crunching on the sidewalk with righteous indignation, and marched back to her beige fortress. I stared after her, then down at old Bessie. My inner calm felt pretty disturbed right about then, too. It wasn't the noise she hated. It was the idea of the noise. The idea that someone else's necessary chore might momentarily impinge upon her perfectly curated existence. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement of it made my teeth ache. I yanked the starter cord. Bessie roared back to life, louder than ever, and I finished the lawn with grim satisfaction, maybe lingering a little longer near her property line than strictly necessary. Tuesday morning, an email landed in my inbox. Forwarded, naturally, through the HOA's ancient, clunky listserv system, which looked like it was designed in 1997 and never updated. The subject line jumped out. Formal noise complaint, Ref. 12 Serenity Lane, Alex Parker. My blood pressure spiked. I clicked it open. It was from the City Code Enforcement Office, a blandly worded notification that a complaint had been received regarding excessive and disruptive noise emanating from lawn care equipment during permitted hours at my address on Saturday morning. It acknowledged the time was, indeed, permissible according to City Ordinance 14 B. Iwu. However, it continued, in the interest of maintaining neighborhood tranquility and fostering positive community relations, we strongly urge the resident to explore quieter alternatives for future lawn maintenance. It was signed by someone named Brenda in code enforcement, probably dictated by Karen herself. No fine. No official violation. Just a passive-aggressive bureaucratic slap on the wrist, a permanent mark on my file. All because Karen's delicate ears couldn't handle the sound of internal combustion doing its job. Explore quieter alternatives. Maintain neighborhood tranquility. It was code for bend over backwards to appease the neighborhood crank. Fine. She wanted quiet. She wanted tranquility. She questioned my methods. I'd give her an alternative. Something high-tech, something complex. Something that would make the rumble of old Bessie seem like a soothing lullaby. Something airborne. My eyes drifted towards the unruly privet hedge separating my yard from the sidewalk, a hedge I absolutely loathed trimming by hand. The gears in my tech support-addled brain began to whir. Oh yes, this could work. This could really work. My first instinct, fueled by spite and 2 IPAs, was pure escalation. Maybe buy the loudest gas-powered leaf blower known to man and run it for hours? Rent a wood chipper and feed suspiciously Karen-shaped branches into it? Too crude, too obvious. This needed finesse. This needed technology. I thought about robotic lawnmowers, but they're quiet, almost stealthy. Where's the fun in that? No, the noise wasn't the real issue Karen had. It was the audacity of me performing a necessary task in a way she didn't approve of. So the solution had to be something that performed a necessary task in a way nobody could possibly approve of. My gaze fell upon the hedge again. Trimming that beast was a sweaty, arm-aching chore involving ladders, extension cords, and inevitable scratches. What if I didn't have to touch it? What if I could trim it? Remotely? From the comfort of my patio chair? With lasers? No, lasers seemed problematic, but maybe blades? Attached to a drone? Not the little camera drones everyone uses to spy on their neighbors, allegedly. No, I needed a beast, a heavy lifter. Something that could carry not just its own weight and batteries, but several pounds of rapidly oscillating vegetation-shredding steel. A drone-powered hedge trimmer. The sheer, beautiful stupidity of the idea hit me like a dropped server rack. It was complicated. It was expensive. It was probably dangerous. It might even be illegal. It was, in short, the perfect response to a complaint about lawnmower noise. Down the rabbit hole I went. My browser tabs multiplied like angry tribbles. Heavy-lift octocopter kits, high-torque brushless motors, calculating drone payload capacity, LiPo battery C ratings explained, FAA regulations Part 107 hazardous materials. Gardening tools weren't listed, score. I learned about thrust-to-weight ratios, propeller pitch, PID controllers, and the terrifying phenomenon known as vortex ring state. Then came the hedge trimmer itself. Gas-powered? Too heavy, too much vibration. Plus the irony of complaining about my gas engine only to use another one was too rich even for me. Corded electric? Tethering a flying machine seemed unwise. Cordless electric it had to be. I researched weights, battery voltages, cutting bar lengths. Even the lightest cordless trimmers weighed 5-7 pounds. Could a drone realistically lift that, plus its own batteries, plus mounting hardware, and remain stable enough to not immediately commit seppuku against the nearest tree? The math looked dicey. The online drone forums were a goldmine of information, just not the information I needed. People discussed lifting cameras, dropping water balloons, delivering pizza badly. Nobody seemed to be discussing strapping power tools designed for amputation to their expensive flying machines. Go figure. I started sketching on my office whiteboard, erasing furiously. Carbon fiber frame, check. 8 powerful motors, check. Massive propellers, check. Dual battery system for redundancy, check. Gimbaled mount for the trimmer, incorporating vibration dampening? Maybe? Remote trigger for the trimmer blades? Definitely. FPV camera system so I could see what I was about to accidentally destroy? Essential. The project, tentatively codenamed ATA, Aerial Topiary Annihilator, was taking shape. And its potential cost was making my wallet sweat. This wasn't a one-man job. My coding skills were solid, and I could solder without setting too many things on fire. But designing flight controllers for unstable payloads and fabricating custom metal parts? That required specialists who were either brilliant, insane, or both. My search led me first to a shadowy figure on the drone racing scene, known only as Zero Cool. His YouTube channel was full of nauseatingly fast FPV flights through abandoned warehouses, set to pounding techno music. He apparently built his own racing drones from scratch. I found his Discord tag and sent a cautious message. After an exchange consisting mostly of rocket emojis, skull emojis, and the acronym IRL, we agreed to meet at the Prop Shop, a local hobby store that smelled faintly of plastic fumes and desperation. Zero Cool looked about 19, pale from too much screen time, wearing a hoodie despite the warm weather, and peered at me through thick glasses that filtered out blue light and possibly reality itself. So, I began, trying to sound casual. I'm working on a custom UAV project. Heavy lift. Needs to carry a specific payload with stability. I slid the spec sheet for a mid-range cordless hedge trimmer across the counter, next to a pile of tiny propellers. Zero Cool picked it up. His eyes widened behind the glasses. He looked at the sheet, then at me, then back at the sheet. He let out a low whistle. Whoa, payload equals hedge trimmer? Bruh. He actually said bruh. That's like maximum entropy, dude. The vibration gonna shake the flight controller into next Tuesday. The weight, gonna need insane thrust. FAA gonna be all up in your airspace like... He paused, tapping the spec sheet. But the challenge? Custom octoframe, maybe coaxial rotors, high discharge lipos in parallel, custom firmware tune? Hella challenging. A slow grin spread across his face. Okay, YOLO, I'm in. But this ain't gonna be cheap. Need serious cashola, like Boku bucks. He made a rubbing fingers together gesture. Deal. Next, the physical attachment. I needed someone who could wrangle metal, understand vibration, and how to futilely attempt to dampen it, and not ask too many questions. Yelp led me to Max Metalworks, a cluttered, greasy workshop on the industrial side of town. Mac himself looked like he'd stepped out of a ZZ Top video longbeard, bandana, arms covered in faded tattoos and welding burns. I laid out the concept. Mount this hedge trimmer onto this theoretical giant drone. Make it stable-ish. Maybe add a remote trigger. Mac picked up the hedge trimmer I'd brought, weighed it in his hand, then looked at the drone sketch I'd made. He chewed on a toothpick for a full minute, his expression unreadable. So, he finally rumbled, his voice like rocks in a tumbler. Flying lawnmower parts, eh? You want to bolt this hunk of buzzing plastic? He shook the trimmer slightly. Onto one of them whirlybird camera things and hack at bushes from the sky? Essentially, yes, I said, but safely and with precision. Mac let out a short, sharp bark of laughter. Safe? Precision? Son, the only thing precise about that contraption is gonna be the location of the crash site. Vibration'll tear it apart. Torque'll spin it like a top. Wind'll carry it into the next county. But... He squinted at my sketch again, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Damn if it wouldn't be something to see. All right, kid. I'll build your crazy death machine mount. Gonna cost you double, though. Call it the "Are you freaking kidding me?" surcharge. Deal again. My savings account whimpered. The next few weeks were a blur of online orders, frantic assembly, and near disasters in my garage. Carbon fiber tubes arrived, motors the size of small fists, propellers that looked like they belonged on a small aircraft. Zero Cool descended into a coding fugue state, muttering about Kalman filters and accelerometer bias while staring intently at lines of code that looked like gibberish to me. Mac delivered the mount a surprisingly clever piece of engineering involving aluminum struts, thick rubber bushings, and a servo-actuated clamp for the trimmer handle. It looked like something designed to hold a missile onto a fighter jet. Integration was challenging. Just bolting Mac's bracket and the trimmer onto the massive octocopter frame threw the center of gravity completely out of whack. Zero Cool had to reprogram the flight controller just to get it to sit level on the bench. Wiring the separate battery for the trimmer and rigging the remote trigger involved sparks, smoke, and at least one panicked dive behind the workbench when the trimmer blades unexpectedly spun up. Finally, the day came for the first hover test. We hauled the beast, now officially christened the Hedgehog drone, 1.0 inches into the backyard. No trimmer attached yet, just the basic drone. Zero Cool armed the motors. 8 propellers spun up with a rising, intimidating whine. He gently increased throttle. The Hedgehog lifted off the ground, hovering smoothly at eye level. Success. Test 2. Add the trimmer. Blades disabled. The drone struggled. It wobbled. It drifted. Zero Cool frantically tweaked settings on his laptop. It hovered, but looked drunk. Test 3. Vibration test. We tied the drone down securely to stakes in the ground, stood back, engaged the trimmer motor remotely. The noise was incredible. The high-pitched whine of the drone motors fighting the furious bzzzt of the trimmer blades. The entire apparatus shook like a paint mixer possessed by demons. We saw screws visibly loosening. A zip tie holding a wire snapped. The camera feed on Zero Cool's monitor turned to static. Mac grunted. "Told you, needs more rubber." He spent an hour adding more dampening bushings. Test 4. First free hover with the trimmer attached and blades buzzing. My heart hammered against my ribs. Zero Cool throttled up slowly. The Hedgehog lifted, shaking, whining, buzzing. It hovered, 3 feet off the ground, looking like a giant, angry, technologically advanced insect. I put on the FPV goggles. The view was shaky, vibrating, terrifying. I nudged the control stick gently forward. The drone lurched violently sideways, the buzzing trimmer head swinging wildly and decapitating a ceramic garden gnome with brutal efficiency. I slammed the throttle down. The drone dropped heavily to the grass. The gnome's little ceramic head rolled accusingly to a stop near my foot. "Okay," Zero Cool said breathlessly, pushing his glasses up. "Needs more tuning. And maybe stay away from the gnomes." This was harder, scarier, and way more expensive than I'd imagined. Was it worth it? I glanced across the street. Karen's curtains twitched. Oh yeah, it was worth it. Our backyard testing hadn't gone unnoticed. During the gnome decapitation incident, Mr. Henderson from next door, a normally unflappable retired history teacher, had apparently called the police non-emergency line. "Yes, hello?" I later imagined him saying, "My neighbor, Alex? He seems to be operating some kind of large, airborne, possibly weaponized garden tool. It just attacked a gnome." 2 officers arrived, looking profoundly bored until they saw the Hedgehog sitting malevolently on my lawn. "Afternoon, sir," Officer Jones said, eyeing the drone. "We received a call about a large, noisy, potentially hazardous flying object." "Officers," I said, trying for breezy confidence and failing miserably. "Just doing some final calibrations on my custom-built, advanced atmospheric particulate collection drone. State-of-the-art." I waved vaguely towards the drone, trying to obscure the hedge trimmer bolted underneath Mac's impressive bracketry. Officer Rodriguez, younger and sharper-eyed, squinted. Is that a black plus Decker cordless hedge trimmer attached to your atmospheric collector, sir?" Caught. Time for Plan B. Barely plausible technobabble. "Ah, keen observation, officer. That's not actually a trimmer. It's a high-frequency oscillating bioparticulate agitator. Standard equipment on this model. It vibrates the air to loosen pollen for easier collection, for science." The officers exchanged the kind of look that cops reserve for people explaining why they have 300 pounds of fertilizer and a copy of the anarchist cookbook. "Right," Officer Jones said slowly. "Science. Look, FAA rules are pretty clear. Keep it under 400 feet, keep it within line of sight, don't fly it over people, and definitely keep it on your own property." He eyed the agitator. "And maybe try not to agitate any bystanders, okay?" They left, shaking their heads, clearly making a mental note. 12 Serenity Lane. Potential gnome-aggressing mad scientist. Weeks turned into a month. More tuning. More near disasters. More money poured into replacement parts and bigger batteries. But finally, the Hedgehog Drone 1.0 was, well, not tame, exactly, but marginally controllable. It was time. Time to unveil my masterpiece of petty revenge. Time for the maiden flight. The target, the overgrown privet hedge running along the front sidewalk, highly visible, directly in Karen's line of sight. Saturday, 11 a.m. Perfect. I felt like Dr. Frankenstein preparing to throw the switch. I meticulously laid out orange traffic cones bought online. Caution, experimental aerial landscaping zone. Enter at own risk of flying twigs. Zero Cool stood nearby, laptop open, headset on, ready to take over when things went sideways. Mac pulled up in his beat-up pickup across the street, leaned against the door, arms crossed, a look of morbid curiosity on his face. He probably had money on whether it would crash, burn, or achieve sentience and attack its creator. And Karen? Oh, she was ready. Perched on her porch swing, phone held high, recording. Her expression was a mixture of outrage and grim satisfaction, clearly anticipating juicy footage for the neighborhood Facebook group. Safety glasses on, FPV goggles down, deep breath. Powering up rotors, I announced into my headset mic. The 8 motors whined to life. Engaging trimmer. The loud, angry bzzzt joined the chorus. The whole contraption vibrated on the grass like an enraged hornet the size of a small dog. Okay, Zero Cool, I muttered. Taking her up? Gently, I eased the throttle. The hedgehog lurched, then lifted, buzzing and whining into the Saturday morning air. It hovered unsteadily at about 10 feet. Whoa, she's drifty, Zero Cool's voice crackled in my ear. Compensate for that trimmer torque. Through the FPV goggles, the world was a shaky, vibrating mess. I nudged the drone towards the hedge. The noise was incredible, less of a roar like Old Bessie, more of a high-frequency assault that set your teeth on edge. This wasn't quieter, it was just differently annoying. Possibly more annoying. Excellent. Approaching the hedge felt like docking a space shuttle during an earthquake. The drone bobbed, it weaved. The trimmer blades, inches from the leaves, looked terrifyingly real in my goggles. I nudged it closer. Contact. The trimmer bit into the hedge, leaves and twigs flew. The drone bucked violently as the blades snagged, then chewed through a thicker branch. The FPV feed jiggled like crazy. Easy does it, Zero Cool coached. Small inputs. Let the blades do the work. I tried to move along the top of the hedge. It wasn't pretty. The cut was jagged, uneven. Sometimes the drone drifted too high, buzzing impotently above the leaves. Sometimes it dipped too low, scalping a chunk out of the hedge like a drunken barber. Branches flew towards the sidewalk. I could hear faint shouting in the background. Probably Karen, possibly someone yelling a warning. Watch the power lines, Zero Cool snapped. I realized I was drifting towards the utility pole. I corrected sharply, overcorrected, and the drone swung back towards the street. That's when Mrs. Gable's prize-winning Bichon Frise, Fifi, chose to investigate a particularly interesting patch of sidewalk directly below my flight path. Dog! Dog! Zero Cool screamed. I saw it in the goggles. A terrifyingly close view of white fluff. I yanked back on the controls. The drone shot upwards, the buzzing blades missing Fifi by what felt like millimeters. Fifi yelped and scrambled backwards. Mrs. Gable, witnessing the near poodle-pocalypse, let out a piercing shriek. My hands were shaking. Okay, point made. Maybe too well. Bringing it down, I announced, cutting the trimmer motor. The sudden drop in noise was almost startling. I guided the hedgehog back towards my lawn, fighting the controls the whole way, and landed it with a less than graceful bump. I ripped off the goggles, heart pounding. The hedge looked like it had been chewed on by a giant, angry robot beaver. Fifi was being frantically comforted by a distraught Mrs. Gable. Karen was still filming, her face pale but triumphant. She had evidence. Mac was actually laughing, shaking his head as he got back in his truck. Zero Cool gave me a shaky thumbs up. Dude, he breathed, That was intense, and maybe slightly reckless. Reckless? Probably. Expensive? Definitely. Effective? Judging by the look on Karen's face as she finally lowered her phone, absolutely. Mission accomplished. The fallout was swift and predictable. Within an hour, Karen's shaky video, dramatically titled, "Shocking Footage, Neighbors Flying Death Drone Attacks Innocent Poodle," was racking up views and horrified emoji reactions on the Serenity Acres community Facebook page. Opinions were sharply divided. Brenda_loves_cats. OMG, that thing is terrifying. Call the police. Call the FAA. Call the National Guard. Dave_likes_beer. LOL Alex, you absolute madman. What'll you invent next? Stan_HOA_prez. This is completely unacceptable. A blatant violation of safety regulations and community standards. Expect official correspondence. Mr_Henderson_history. While the engineering is novel, perhaps ground-based tools remain prudent. The HOA correspondence arrived the next day via certified mail, threatening fines large enough to require a second mortgage, legal action, and possibly public shaming at the annual potluck. They cited bylaws I didn't even know existed, covering everything from operation of unsafe machinery to aesthetic disruption via airborne apparatus. Then the police returned. Not Jones and Rodriguez this time, but Sergeant Miller, a guy who looked like he'd seen it all and was deeply unimpressed by suburban shenanigans, accompanied by a stern-looking woman who introduced herself as being from City Code Enforcement and vaguely familiar with FAA guidelines. "Alex," Sergeant Miller said, his voice leaving no room for bioparticulate agitators. "We need to talk about the drone, the one with the hedge trimmer." He held up a tablet showing Karen's viral video. "We've had multiple calls. The HOA is involved, and frankly, what we see on this video looks incredibly reckless." I started to explain it was a prototype, experimental, safety precautions were taken. Miller held up a hand. "The FAA has specific rules, Mr. Parker," the code enforcement woman cut in, adjusting her glasses. Section 107.19 covers careless or reckless operation. Flying an unmanned aircraft with unguarded, powered, reciprocating blades in a residential area near people and pets. That is the dictionary definition of careless or reckless. It doesn't matter if the tool itself is legal. Operating it that way creates an unacceptable hazard. Sergeant Miller leaned in slightly. "Look, nobody got hurt, thankfully. But we could file a report with the FAA. That could mean thousands in fines, losing your drone pilot privileges entirely, or," he paused for effect, "you could voluntarily agree right now to permanently disable the hedge trimming capability of this device. Your choice." The threat hung heavy in the air. My dreams of perfectly manicured hedges achieved via terrifying aerial robots evaporated. My future ability to fly even a tiny camera drone was on the line. I looked at the hedgehog, sitting silently in the garage. It was magnificent, it was madness, and its hedge trimming days were over. "Okay, Sergeant," I sighed, defeated. "You win. I'll disable it." I texted Zero Cool the news. His reply was swift. "Total bummer. FAA Fun Police. Was epic while it lasted, though. LMK if you want to build a drone that shoots Nerf darts." I called Mac. "Heard the fuzz grounded your buzz bomber," he chuckled. "Can't say I'm shocked. Lucky Fifi the attack poodle didn't press charges. Still got that bracket, though. Could probably mount a decent spotlight on it. Or maybe a really annoying air horn? Tempting? So, the Hedgehog Drone 1.0 was officially neutered. I removed the trimmer's battery connection and the remote trigger mechanism. I even zip-tied the blades together for good measure. But I left the trimmer housing and Mac's impressive mounting bracket attached. It still looked like a flying menace, even if it was now harmless. Sometimes, on a quiet afternoon, I'd take it out, power up the drone motors, not the trimmer, and just let it hover menacingly in the backyard for a few minutes. Just to remind Karen that while the blades were still, the potential for technologically advanced annoyance remained. And the lawn? I went out and bought the quietest, fanciest, most expensive lithium-ion electric mower I could find. The kind that whispers across the grass like a gentle breeze. Not because Karen won. Oh no, it was a strategic move. Now I could be the one complaining about noise. Maybe her eco-goats bleat too loudly. Maybe the wind chimes on her porch violate subsection 12C. Life settled back into its usual rhythm, but something had shifted. Karen still gives me the stink eye, but there's a hint of fear in it now. She knows I'm capable of weaponizing Ryobi. The neighborhood still talks about the flying hedge trimmer incident in hushed tones or loud guffaws, depending on their allegiance. Was it worth it? The thousands of dollars, the brushes with the law, the near poodlectomy, the permanent entry on the HOA's watch list? Objectively? Probably not. It was a monumentally stupid, expensive, and dangerous exercise in technological spite. But sometimes when I'm out on my patio, sipping a beer, and I see Karen meticulously trimming her bizarre geometric hedges with tiny, silent hand shears, I glance towards the garage where the disarmed hedgehog sits. And I smile. Because she knows. She knows I built a flying hedge trimmer just to annoy her. And that, my friends, is priceless. Now, about that air horn attachment Mac mentioned.